Greetings, I'm Dave Throgmorton, Director of the Carbon County Higher Education Center. Tonight I'm going to introduce you to a cool little tool that you can use to explore Carbon County history by yourself at your home with your home computer. But there's a backstory that goes along with it. Part of the founding myth of the United States of America is that we were founded on the principle that people came here so that they could worship the way they wished to, so that they could have religious freedom to think what they wanted to think or not, and to worship as they wished. That's actually not true. The people who came here indeed came here fleeing persecution, but when the first settlers came, the first settlers from Northern Europe, England in particular, came to the United States, one of the first things that they did was set up a system of religious persecution that was pretty impressive. And American history actually has a whole series of religious persecutions that have gone on over the years. So the mythology that somehow or another we are here so that everybody can worship as they wish, that's not quite true, because there have been episodes over the years where we have tried to prohibit people from worshiping as they wish. One of those started in 1887 in Clinton, Iowa. It was the American Protective Association. It was an anti-Catholic association founded in Clinton, Iowa. And in a very short period of time, there were tens of thousands of American citizens, including a number of influential citizens in Carbon County and Rawlins, who signed on to the pledge of the American Protective Association. And part of that pledge said that they would try to prohibit Catholics from A, working. We won't hire anybody who's Catholic. And B, they would prohibit Catholics from engaging in any political offices, voting against them, actively working against them, and so forth. And it was a fairly powerful social movement. It was a pretty big deal. Finally died out in about 1911, but between 1887 and 1911, it was a big thing. In 1894, the governor of Wyoming was John Osborne. And yes, this is the same John Osborne that peeled the skin off of George Parrott's chest and made a pair of shoes out of it. So kind of a shaky character from anybody's perspective, I think. But he was the governor of the state of Wyoming. Francis Warren was a senator from the state of Wyoming. And in 1894, we ended up with the first Memorial Day. 1894 was the first year that Congress decreed that the 30th of May would be, they called it then Dedication Day, a national holiday. And the purpose of the national holiday was to essentially celebrate the soldiers who had died during the Civil War. Okay, that's kind of the first part of the backstory. The next part of the backstory is this. Taking a look at this photograph that I have on the screen here. I took this photograph from the westbound lane of Interstate 80 last week. This photograph is basically what people who drive by this town see. We have something like 26,000 people a day that drive east and west past us on Interstate 80. Those people, out of boredom or curiosity, they look to the north, and this is what they see. They see our community. And as you can see, one of the things that they see in our community, one of the icons, is right there. St. Joseph's Catholic Church. That speaks to everybody who drives by our community. But this isn't the way it always was. In 1894, when John Osborne and Senator Warren delivered the very first Memorial Day speeches, John Osborne took the occasion to decry the American Protective Association. Essentially what he said was they're a bunch of bigots and they basically don't understand America, and anybody who subscribes to what they believe in is pretty stupid. And he said it in very eloquent and loquacious terms. That wasn't a popular point of view. He was criticized in the local newspaper the following week. The following week they said, John Osborne is going to do anything he can possibly do to court the Catholic vote, even if he has to, suck up to them. And that's just the way politicians are. Yeah, it's probably true. But the one thing that John Osborne did do is, in order to show that he actually meant that kind of bigotry had no place in Carbon County, had no place in Rawlins, John Osborne bought the bells for the local Catholic Church. Now, the local Catholic Church in 1894 did not look like the church in this picture. The local Catholic Church in 1894 looked like this. Now, someday, I'd like to know the story about those power lines, because I think that in and of itself is a cool story, and I'm going to chase that one down. But this is what the Catholic Church looked like in 1894. I thought for a very long time, having read this history, that John Osborne bought the bells for that church. I was wrong. But here's the research methods piece, and here's the tool that I'd like to introduce you to. This is the homepage of the Wyoming Newspapers Database. This is brought to you by the Wyoming State Library. The Carbon County Library, by the way, is an important component of the Wyoming State Library. What they have at the Wyoming State Library, we have at our local library, and we also have at our branch libraries in Saratoga, in Encampment, in Little Snake River, you name it. Support your local library. But in any event, what you can do is you can log on to this website, wyomingnewspapers.gov, and you'll find this as the lead page. At that point, you click on this link right here, enter the databases. When you click on this database, this is the next thing that you're going to see. You'll see that you have a choice. You can look at these newspapers by date, by county, by city, or by the newspaper name. I've chosen by city and clicked on this link. Here you have it. Look at all these cities in Wyoming. Every single one of these cities had newspapers, and the Wyoming Library, State Library, has basically archived these newspapers dating back to 1849 up until the 1920s. Well, the ones I'm most interested in at the moment are right here, Rawlins, Riverside right below it. Great newspapers. But I'm interested in what was going on in Rawlins, and I'm interested in knowing what was going on in Rawlins in 1894. So I click on Rawlins, and this is what I find. Here's the range of newspapers that are available to me. We see everything from the 11 o'clock Roast, Carbon County Journal, blah, blah, blah. The main newspapers for Rawlins at the times were the Carbon County Journal, which was a Democratic newspaper, and the Rawlins Republican, which was a Republican newspaper. I clicked on the Carbon County Journal. I went to basically Memorial Day, the end of May, 1894, and I came up with this. This is the entire transcript of John Osborne's speech at the Rawlins Cemetery on May 30th, 1894, where he basically called out the bigots that were trying to exclude Catholics from public life in Rawlins, Wyoming. It's an eloquent speech. It's a real barn burner. Interesting thing in this day and age, these politicians were not too concerned with writing speeches that basically were written at the 7th grade level. Do the research. I challenge you on this one. If you take a look at it, the 2016 presidential debates here in the United States, for both parties, if you look at what the speechwriters put in the mouths of the candidates, it was written at the 7th grade level. We're losing ground here, friends. We're losing ground. This was not written at the 7th grade level. But basically, if you log into this website, you can explore any newspaper that you would like to explore. You can find out pretty much anything that you would like to find out. But the one thing I didn't find out from these newspapers, I searched and searched and searched for something in these papers that talked about the time that John Osborne bought the bells for the Catholic Church, for St. Joseph's Catholic Church. Finally, I was defeated. I thought, okay, I'm not going to find it in these public records. So I called the preeminent historian in Carbon County, Dan Kinnaman, and I said, Dan, do you know anything about the bells at the St. Joseph's Church? He says, I know a little bit about it, but I'm not real sure. Let me look through my records. Dan's archives in his living room, they are a state treasure, probably even a national treasure. They need to be preserved. But a couple of days later, Dan called me up and he said, hey, what I found here is I found a parish newsletter from August of 1916 when St. Joseph's Church was dedicated. And the organist, Cora Phelan, who was basically one of the organizers of the dedication moment, had mentioned to the local reporter in the newspaper that they were very proud of their new church, which, as you can see, is a beautiful new church. Right there, kind of an iconic vision here in Carbon County. But they were also very pleased that John Osborne had purchased the bells for this church. So the bells that hang in the belfry of St. Joseph's Catholic Church were donated to that church by John Osborne. Now the interesting thing about it was, in 1916, John Osborne was no longer a politician. He was the governor, he was the mayor of Rawlins, he was the governor of Wyoming, he was our state representative, he was Undersecretary of State under Woodrow Wilson. But in 1916, he held no political position. And so in 1916, when he bought the bells for this church, he simply did it because it was the right thing to do to strike a blow against bigotry in Rawlins. Thanks for listening.